Hello and welcome back to Radio 2. This is lesson 7 of the 8-part practical programming and making content. Okay, so we're almost at the end of this specific module. And what we'll be looking at in this class today will be interaction, okay? So this is lecture 26, and we're looking at page 148 till 156 in Next Level Radio. The reality of any audio product is that it is only valuable when listeners are engaged with the content. In other words, if listeners are actually listening and are interacting and concentrating on the product. This is difficult to accomplish for any audio content creator because almost all audio products occur while people are doing something else. So people are listening to the radio while they're driving or cooking or washing dishes or going to work or at work and busy working. To achieve proper engagement with content, a presenter needs to stand out. They need to be memorable at all times. They need to create a radio personality that can keep listeners engaged and actively participating in the audio product. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at is different methods of how we can help you as a presenter develop a character that can engage and entice or enthrall a listener through all the daily clutter of our lives while creating truly meaningful on-air interactions. Creating a brand personality. Ask yourself the following question. If you disappeared from radio forever, would anyone care besides your mother? If a presenter struggles to answer this question in the affirmative, then the truth is they need to work on developing a brand personality that listeners will care about, because fact of the matter is, if you disappear tomorrow, there's the big probability that no one really is going to notice. Johnson provides 6 rules that need to be remembered before presenters start creating a personality or a character profile. And these are, firstly, be authentic. Okay, so base your on-air personality on how you are in real life. Represent the best parts of yourself. Secondly, they fit. Your personality must be a good fit with the station and the other presenters. So make sure that you fit into the culture of that station. The third one is memorable. Being interested makes a personality memorable. Then you want to be likable. Likability is the most important part of the personality. Find traits in yourself that your audience will like. Be three-dimensional. Being 3D means having layers, okay, to your personality that will be revealed over time. So kind of like Donkey will say in Shrek, like an onion has layers. You should have layers, okay, as a person or as a presenter that you will reveal to the listeners over time. And lastly, quirks. Quirks are very powerful on air. These often include personality flaws, but ones that are fun. So, for example, these are aspects of your personality that people tease you about. Perhaps a tendency to eat too much chocolate. In my case, a tendency to eat too much chocolate and to eat too much crisps. Okay, so now we've mentioned the 6 rules for creating a good on-air personality. And from there now, we're looking at the 5 steps for creating a good on-air personality. The first step is to gather information. This is the first step in this process and consists of presenters collecting as much information about themselves as possible. Here, Johnson suggests that a presenter can ask the following 4 questions, then document the answers methodically. So the first question would be, who am I? And you would then answer, I am whatever you are. The answer should be about who you are, not about what you do. So, for example, don't answer by saying a radio presenter or a good father. Search yourself, find a core character trait that defines your personality. So, for example, Your I am statement could be, I am a hopeless romantic. I am an eternal optimist. I am shallow but sincere. I am an eternally good person, whatever it might be, okay? Then support the statement with anecdotes and stories to prove that it's true. Your second question there is then, who was I? And then you're going to say, I was whatever your answer is. So here you should search for clear adjectives that define your past, okay? So it should be a short description of your emotional history. So I was afraid to fail. I was always happy. I was always lonely. Something like that. Now explain why you are or were that way. Use stories and examples to demonstrate the adjective. Dig into your past and your present. What is the story of my life if I have to write my life story? And then you would fill in the blank, whatever is my peep is the story of my life, okay? This is the third statement, and this is a running theme that has stayed with you forever. So this is the barrier, the battle, the obstacle, or the nemesis that has always been in your way. Your barrier could be searching for Mr. Right, not fitting in, wandering around lost. Whatever it might be is the story of my life. Finding examples to support barriers should be quite easy. People don't normally struggle with finding the negatives. And then the last question there is, what are my personal quirks? My individual flaws are PEEP. So identify the personality quirks that set you apart. These individual flaws are usually the first thing listeners remember about you. This is what causes listeners to say, she's just like me. So I secretly love whatever. I secretly hate. And then PEEP haunts me. I'm bad at whatever you're bad at. In my case, sport. I'm bad at sport, period. Any sport. I think people around me find it quite funny. And then what is your biggest fear? Okay. And then I wish I was X, but I'm really Y. Essentially, quirks or flaws are what make us relatable and likable. Okay, so it's important that you fill that in. And with that, we move from step one. So now we've gathered information. We have a lot of information now about ourselves. And we go to step two now, organizing the traits. And this information we're now going to organize into 3 categories, which is positive traits, negative traits, and all quirks. From here, Johnson points out 4 further areas that can be explored. From here, we can now explore the following 4 areas. Your comedic perspective. So what kind of sense of humor do you have? Sarcastic, silly, or dry? Think of what makes you laugh. I have a dry sense of humor, definitely. Then your talking points. What do you do and what do you and your friends talk about? Are you an expert in anything? So my friends and I talk about different topics. A lot of spirituality topics, a lot of political topics, a lot of media, a lot of radio and TV. We talk about music and about production, etc. Okay, so lots of topics that we speak about. Your central conflict, what creates fiction? What creates friction in your life? So what makes you tick? What is it that pushes your boundaries? And then your secondary character traits. So these consist of other interesting traits that you have, although they are not central to your character. So this is something you must sit and think about again. Then step 3, the character synopsis. At this stage, it's time to take all of these lists and to identify the core personality traits. Take these core traits and summarize them into a short, succinct and powerful statement about the character. This should be a list of 5 or so character traits and quirks. And some examples might be that, let's take a character named Shauna. She might be extremely witty, opinionated, larger than life, self-deprecating, and fun. She never takes herself seriously and is comfortable taking the mickey out of herself first before making fun of others. She has struggles with her weight. She has struggled with her weight her entire life. And then there's Johnny, and he's a real guy's guy. He enjoys the single life's benefits and manly things like rugby, brandy, beer, pies, and rock music. He's also a coffee addict. He's a hopeless romantic and has struggled his whole life to find love. He's basically a romantic disaster. Okay, so now we've done the character synopsis, and then we move on to step 4, which is our 3-word summary. So here we are now reducing the essence of the character. So the essence of your character, we are now reducing into a few words. These will consist of the 3 most prominent character traits of you, so of the presenter. Taking into consideration Shauna and Johnny, who we just spoke about in the character synopsis, Shauna would then be witty, larger than life, and fun. And Johnny will then be a guy's guy, a beer lover, and a romantic disaster. Step 5, the last step. So we've taken all this information, we've organized it, we've written a synopsis, we've broken that synopsis down even further into a 3-word summary, and now we're documenting it. So the final step now is to put all of these aspects that we've investigated about ourselves, so that you've investigated about yourself, on a 1-page, easy to reference character map. This map should contain the following items. So this map should contain the name of your show, your logo, your personality's name, a photo of yourself, your positive traits, your negative traits, central conflict, quirks, your type of sense of humor, your contradictions, any other traits, your likes, your hates, things that make you endearing, and your synopsis. Okay, this brings us to Chris Jordan's spin method. So this method, which is used to find your on-air personality or character, Chris has developed over many years, okay? Chris himself is a presenter, a producer, and someone who's trained a lot of South Africa's media personalities. And his method is this spin method, and it starts with the S. This part is really about being true to yourself and not ever trying to be someone that you are not while you are on air. So don't copy someone else's personality. It will damage your career, and that person already exists. The audience will detect when you're not being authentic. Audience members are smart. This is why a character map must always be based on the truth. It may be exaggerated, embellished, and enhanced, but it still needs to be faithful to reality. So it still needs to be authentic to you. Okay. The next one is P for personality. Being a personality that evokes an emotional response in listeners is the most important part of a character profile. This personality amplified is what we find ourselves glued to day after day when we switch on the radio. You can be an articulate, well-spoken individual, but without personality, you're going to struggle maintaining longevity in radio. Next one is the I. So be personally invested, or at least sound like you are completely invested in the content that you are delivering. If you don't believe in what you are saying, no one else will either. If you find the content boring, your audience will also be bored while you are relaying the content, okay, while you are talking about it. Also, don't badmouth a song that you are playing on air, because it makes no sense. Why would you play something that you don't like? Because remember, they don't know that you don't choose the music. So be personally invested about what it is that you are speaking of and what is happening on air. Lastly, the N stands for natural. Presenters should strive to be as natural a personality as the one people will encounter every day if they meet you on the street. This means working to rid yourself of radio pitfalls and unnatural ways of speaking in your natural voice, accents, and tone. So if we now start developing character definition, Jeff McHugh created an exercise. So before performing anything on air, you need to start by constructing your character's point of view. Okay. An example would be, think about how Snow White would do a traffic report. She would probably sing the whole thing firstly. Yes, she would do a happy sing-along, and she would encourage drivers to smile and say good morning to everyone in the next lane. So in the same way, you need to answer from your own perspective. How do you feel about the piece emotionally, the piece that you are doing? What is your inner dialogue saying? Do you have a personal story about the piece? Do you have any opinions on the piece or the content? Think about the content as a stage on which your character is dancing. Your flaws and quirks make the content original as opposed to being generic. So that brings us to being yourself. Being yourself is the most powerful weapon. If we need to compare a radio presenter to a character in a play or a TV show, when you watch a well-written TV show, the characters are clear, they're well-defined, and deeply developed. When you're listening to a radio show, the same clarity needs to be portrayed by the characters. You need to do a full audit on your character before you develop a radio show or a podcast through asking the following questions. What is your status and your life stage? What do you stand for? What do you enjoy? What frustrates you? What words would you use to describe yourself? Do you see, as a presenter, you need to know yourself extremely well. You need to know everything about yourself in order for you to be this great character presenter that you can be. Another couple of questions we can ask ourselves. What do you enjoy? So what is your status and life stage? What do you stand for? What do you enjoy? What frustrates you? And what words would you use to describe yourself? Every show needs to have a full understanding of each character and how the program fits into its market and its communities. Once the characters are clear, the goal is to speed the audience's understanding of and the familiarity with the role, and to ensure that all that is said and done is true to that definition. This final point from Lloyd, the one that we just read, the one that we just spoke about, is a really important one to remember, and one that perfectly sums up why these 4 techniques of creating characters and character definitions were added or is being spoken about now. If a radio presenter can try to embody, understand, and project their truthful and somewhat exaggerated character, they will genuinely connect with the listeners in an authentic and real way. Doing this means creating real connections and meaningful interactions with listeners. With regards to the exaggerated comment, have you ever watched a high fashion show and thought to yourself, who actually wears these crazy pieces? I do that all the time, by the way. Imagine clothing pieces that have giant feathers coming out of the model's hair or dress, with trails longer than the ramp on which the model is walking, and their shoes. You never really see these pieces being worn outside of the fashion runway shows, or you do occasionally, but not often. So if you ask a fashion designer about this, The whole idea with high fashion is that it's about exaggeration. It's about dressing and ramping an idea up 10 or 20 or 30-fold, okay, to really show off the idea behind that season's tastes. So that's what we're trying to do with these characters. We're trying to exaggerate, to ramp up a character. So for example, if a designer decides that feathers are in this season, the runway will be full of larger than life feather pieces, and it's exaggerated feathers everywhere. This theme is then meant to be dressed down in normal everyday wear, to subtly reflect the feather theme. So we're not doing away with the theme, we're just toning it down. This process is similar to the art of constructing a radio character, except it's the opposite way around. Characteristics as defined by using any of the previously mentioned techniques, okay, that we spoke about. So here, and spin here. Need to be taken from subtle normal heights and dressed up as if one were putting them on a runway. They need to be exaggerated and they need to be made larger than life. This will then make them memorable. This will then make them memorable and entertaining and makes radio interactions with the listeners exciting and meaningful. So we're trying to exaggerate the emotional side of it to connect better with the listeners. If we look at the flow of interactions, an important part of any interaction on air is who the interaction is directed at. So in other words, with whom the presenter is talking. The direction of the conversation should mostly be based as such. So the presenter is speaking directly with the listener. If we now look at the others though, okay, so this is the ideal. This is in essence what we want. A lot of presenters, especially those with co-presenters or teams, make the mistake, however, of communicating and speaking to each other only, which leaves the listener to merely observe the conversation. So that's that second diagram. So presenter speaking directly with co-presenter and the listener becomes the observer. What happens there? Think about if you have friends and two friends that are having a conversation, you're standing next to them, but they're excluding you, not necessarily on purpose, but they're having a conversation with each other and maybe an inside joke that you don't really know what they're talking about. It makes you feel excluded. And if you're excluded as a listener, you might tune out completely. So if we move to the third diagram there, so doing this can sometimes be useful. However, the majority of the conversation should be directed toward the listener. So as follows, presenter and co-presenter are speaking directly with the listener. The same dynamic needs to be applied when presenters are talking to a listener on the phone. The interaction could be heard as follows. The presenter speaking directly with the caller. So the listener now becomes the observer. Again, in some cases, this can work and prove to be entertaining, but mostly the conversation should be directed as follows. So the presenter and caller speaking directly with the listener. So it depends. If there's a prank, okay, where the presenter is talking with the caller, that works, where the listener is an observer because there's humor. You are laughing at the piece or at the caller. But mostly you want the presenter and caller to speak directly with you as a listener. When a presenter combines a strong, memorable character with the ability to talk directly with listeners, you are in such a good space to create engaging, memorable, and entertaining radio. Okay. So to recap briefly, any audio product is only valuable when listeners are engaged with the content. Okay. This includes you as a person on air, or your character on air, which brings us to creating a brand personality. You need to create a good on-air personality, and the 6 rules for creating good on-air personality: being authentic, having a personality that's a good fit with the station and presenters, being memorable, so being interested and being interesting makes a personality memorable, being likable, so finding traits within yourself that the audience will like, being 3-dimensional, so being like an onion, having layers, okay, that can be revealed over time, and having quirks. We've said quirks are very powerful on air, and these include personality flaws. Then the 5 steps for creating a good on-air personality: gathering information about yourself, organizing these traits that you've now taken, creating a character synopsis for yourself, taking that and making a 3-word summary out of it, and then documenting everything on a 1-pager that'll describe who you are as a personality. And then the spin method briefly. The S, being true to yourself. Don't be anyone else except for you on air, because any other personality already exists. Okay, so be authentic. P for personality. Being a personality that evokes an emotional response. So being able to evoke emotion in other people. Being the I, so for being the I, putting in the I, being personally invested, or at least sounding like you are completely invested. If you don't believe what you're saying, no one else will either. And then the N for natural. So you as a presenter should strive to be as natural or as authentic a personality as you can be. So if I meet you on the street, you should be the exact same person as you are on air. Developing your character definition. Or the content. And then being yourself. Being yourself is your most powerful weapon. So you need to do a full audit on your character by asking yourself, what is your status and life stage? What do you stand for? What do you enjoy? What frustrates you? What words would you use to describe yourself? You as the presenter must always speak directly with the listener, okay? Or you and your co-presenter needs to speak with the listener. Or lastly, you and your caller must speak directly with the listener. There are cases where you as the presenter can speak directly with your co-presenter, and these can be useful, but the majority of the times you'll do it as you and your presenter with the listener. The same with a caller. You can speak directly to a caller. This can work and prove entertaining, but mostly the conversation should be directed as presenter and caller speaking directly with the listener. And that brings me to your homework. So using everything that you've learned in this lesson, I want you to answer the following questions. Briefly describe your personality. In other words, answer the question any station manager will ask you, and that's tell me about yourself. Name 5 skills that you think you need to bring to the table as a professional broadcaster, and explain why they are necessary in doing your job properly. Using your answer in question 1, so everything describing your personality, apply the spin method to your personality and characterize yourself according to the method's core principles. Okay, so that is your homework. So your homework is getting to know yourself better, in essence, from a radio broadcaster point of view. And that brings us to the end of this lecture. There was quite a lot of information in this, specifically to start creating your on-air character. Okay, so please go through all of this and please do this homework because it will only benefit you in the long run. Okay, and with that, I say goodbye for now until our next lesson. Bye.